opportunity. For me, this is a particularly poignant occasion. You may gather I was interviewed by the Oxford Times. I never knew some of my great-grandparents, great-uncles, cousins. Of my father. Sorry? Yeah, that's okay. I'm not a professional then. Now you can hear me. Sorry, I have a lot of people that said. Anyhow, I never knew half of my great-grandparents. I never knew lots of uncles, aunts, cousins, and so on, who I only ever see from family photos. And so I'm very gratified to see a good turnout today. If you look at your program, one thing that's also very splendid in terms of commemorating this dreadful Holocaust and the extermination is the video you're going to see by Leslie Spiro, which is coming shortly, which is why we have this screen. So I think that's enough from me, so I'm going to invite Annalise Dodds to come and read Shema by Prima Levi. Annalise.
You who live secure in your warm houses, who return at evening to find hot food and friendly faces, consider whether this is a man who labours in the mud, who knows no peace, who fights for a crust of bread, who dies at a yes or no. Consider whether this is a woman without hair or name, with no more strength to remember, eyes empty and womb cold as a frog in winter. Consider that this has been. I commend these words to you. Engrave them on your hearts. When you are in your house, when you walk on your way, when you go to bed, when you rise, repeat them to your children. Or may your house crumble, disease render you powerless, your offspring avert their faces from you.
Hi, I'm Leslie Spiro. I've been living in Oxford for about 20 years, and I'm the eldest son of Harry Spiro, who is a Holocaust survivor. We knew from a very early stage that my father was born in Poland and in a town called Piotrków Trzewnowska, and that there'd been the Holocaust, and that his mother, father, and his sister had been taken away to Treblinka and killed. He'd worked first as a slave labourer and then gone into the camp system as the Russians approached. So we knew that level of detail. And the one story that we knew from very, very early on was the wisdom of my mother's mother, my grandmother on on father's side. And when they were deporting the ghetto in Piotrków, there was a thing that all the people who were working in this factory should leave. And my father would have been about 12 years old at the time. I think he was 10 when the Germans invaded Poland. He had got this job in this factory where he started to be paid, and then they stopped the pay, but at least they fed him. And he wanted to go with his parents and his sister. And she pushed him out into the street with, these kind of family legends, this thing, at least let one of us survive. And my father talks very movingly about walking down the ghetto, this would be 3 in the morning or something, streets being deserted, apart from a few people who were working in the factories. And that was the last time he saw his parents. And so that idea of strength and wisdom from his mother's experience, from his mother, was one of the stories that I knew from a very early time. The kind of more detailed stuff about seeing bodies in showers and that kind of stuff, those stories came a lot later. So I've known that story all my life. And it's always been a story of strength and hope and a positive story. And then about 10 years ago, I saw my father giving a talk. He mentioned this story, and someone said, well, what did you feel about your mother? And then completely to my surprise, he said that he was really upset and angry at her for forcing that separation when he'd done so much to support them over the preceding 3 years. And that it had taken a long time, really, to kind of process and stop feeling these negative things and to see his mother as a heroic figure. And so the kind of interesting thing is, you hear these stories and you never really, how you process them changes based on your life experience. The Germans didn't come in and decide to kill all the Jews that they could find immediately. That's something that progressed. And there was a kind of series of, first of all, forcing, well, in Germany, wearing yellow stars and stuff, and then in Poland, starting the process of having ghettos, which was not something unknown to Jewish history. And in fact, I believe Piotrków was the first Jewish ghetto in Poland. And then they kind of started restricting, you couldn't go out to work, and there was a process that led to extermination camps and slave labor camps. And my dad, who would have been 9 or 10 at that time, started smuggling food in, going over the walls and out and trading, getting stuff to trade for food, bringing it back, and using that to support his family. And so it's kind of very heroic stories. You know, you could say, did I see myself that way? I could see myself almost jumping over being, you know, every child wants to think of themselves as that kind of heroic figure. And then the Germans started shooting the boys, and then his mother said, look, you're not going to be, shouldn't want to see him killed. Anyway, the last time he was going out, he'd promised his mother he wouldn't do any more smuggling, just one more job. And he collected as much money as he could, and he went to this farmer, and he wanted to buy a load of grain, and it was too heavy for him to carry. And so the farmer said, well, you can drive through the ghetto the way the street worked. You could do it. And so Dad had to give this Polish farmer all the money and just rely on the fact that at this time, at this day, he would drive through the piece. And he did. And, you know, there was not like my dad would have taken him to court for breach of contract. And there was some risk for him doing that. And he did that. And it was, you know, my father and his family survived the winter based on that grain. And so that was an act really, I mean, it's a business transaction, but it was honourable, and the guy could have easily just not done it. There's another story that I heard when I was a bit older about when Dad was a slave labourer in his factory. They still lived in a bit of the ghetto. Obviously, there were very few people there, but there were some Jews had hidden when they were being deported, and the Germans wanted to reduce the numbers and said you've got to find 200 people, and they weren't going to send them to a camp. They were just going to take them outside and shoot them into the forest and shoot them, which is what they did. And Dad had a card that said he worked in this factory, but they rounded him up anyway, and he said, no, I'm meant to be in the ghetto. You know, you have these, despite the complete illegality and immorality of it, you know, people cling to these rules like it's not fair. I mean, the whole situation is not fair, but from his point of view, he understood, I guess, internalized the fact that Germans killed Jews, and he wasn't meant to be killed at that point. So he was in this synagogue, and they were waiting to get enough Jews to make it worthwhile to run them out, to drive them out to the hills and shoot them. And they picked up a lot of people from his shift at the factory, and the factory manager was saying, where are my Jews? I can't meet my targets, because this was a factory that produced glass medicine bottles that were used by the Germans for medicine. And someone said, you're not going to see them again. They're in the synagogue. They're going to take them out and shoot them. And he went, well, I can't meet my quotas if you don't do that. So they went, okay. And there's a bit of the story that I knew again from my late teens, that there was a man behind him who was carrying a child. And he refused to go without his child. And I used to be able to tell this story when I was younger, very straightforwardly. And the guy refused. The guard said, look, you can't, why, you're both going to die, you know that. And he said, yes. But he refused to leave his child. And so they went and they took somebody else out. And so that was a story that I told, and it was a shocking story, and it's a very melodramatic story. But it's only after I had children that I found it very hard, because instead of being my father's position, I was in the position of the man with the child. The ordinary experience of the Holocaust was that you died if you were Jewish. I can't remember the exact numbers. 6 million Jews perished, very few Jews from Europe survived, and the ordinary experience was to die in starvation, disease, gas chambers, overwork, being shot in the forest, whatever it is, and that's the ordinary experience. What it means for ordinary people, I think, there's also the ordinary people who sat around the side. I mean, this is from my understanding. I mean, what the guards thought of themselves and the people who architected the final solution. There's a famous quote, I can't remember it exactly, but amongst people, some saying, the struggle for us being the people who lead the final solution, the extermination of the Jews, is to preserve our humanity as we kind of stand in the trenches of bodies or whatever. And you think, well, that's a peculiar thing, but they saw themselves as ordinary people doing a job. It was just a horrifying job, and I think so. I mean, the point is, we're all ordinary, as you said. We all have different strengths and weaknesses, and some of us are nicer, some of us are less nice. It's just these extraordinary events. When the Russians came to liberate Theresienstadt, they saw what was there and horrified and disgusted. And they said to the inmates, the freed prisoners, that for 24 hours they could do what they liked. They could kill anybody and no Russians wouldn't stop them doing anything. And I said to my dad, and he would have been 15, 16 at that time, and I said, well, did you do anything? And he said, no. He was hungry and he was tired and he was weak, and it wasn't what was on his mind. His mind was on survival, and his mother in particular, I think, search for food was really, really important, and that was the focus. So I think maybe in some respects, revenge is something that you need to be a bit stronger and a bit of a better place to worry about. There's a kind of maybe a hierarchy of things you want to feel. But my dad said that there was a Russian officer who took a real interest in them, and I don't know where they were getting food from, but maybe it was Russians that were feeding them. And then when my dad heard about this organisation that was going to bring a load of Jews who had to be under 16, so they didn't compete with wouldn't take jobs from local workers in the UK, that could come to the UK as orphans, he was going, and my dad said this Russian officer was really disappointed that he wasn't going to stay and help build the Soviet Socialist republics and stuff. So my dad came over to the UK. So Windermere was a place of recuperation, starting normalisation. I mean, it's really starting to become a person. So they were all young and they all had they all had similar experiences of loss and appalling, disgusting behaviour, things that were done to them and things that they witnessed being done. And so I think probably one thing the boys, as they called themselves, were not very big on self-pity. My father spent a lot of time just on his own once they learned to eat properly. So famously, I was told that when they first sat down to meals, they passed the bowl of bread around, and by the time we got to the end of the table, it was always empty because they were always squirreling food away, because that was a good thing to learn. And they had to learn that they didn't need to do that anymore. And not only learn, but actually believe that they didn't need to do that anymore. And that's part, I think, of becoming a person. The World Jewish Relief, who organised everything for them, dispersed them into living together in hostels, effectively, with a hostel leader, so that they could start to integrate into society. And they started to kind of have to do jobs, and they were told they had to do jobs. No one was going to give them, and that became a very important part of what they do. And they stayed together, very strong friendships that lasted through their lives. I understand why. I mean, the Holocaust is so unbelievable that the experience of my dad in those 6 years needs to be told, so that we can learn from it and never forget. The capacity for joy amongst my father and his friends, all who were Holocaust survivors, was remarkable. That you think of trauma, like me at the moment, is about sadness and reflection, but that's not how they were at all, ever. The kind of, they'd all gone through the most terrible things. But when they were together, I'm crying because so many of them, not surprisingly, have died. I'm just kind of remembering them, but they were a remarkable group of people, not only because of what they'd suffered, but because of how they were having gone through that suffering.
I'm delighted you all had a chance to see that from Leslie, who does live in Oxford. And I do commend the film afterwards, if you can stay, by the recording by his father, which is full of humanity. I mean, it's most incredible. It's the background to this story. So anyhow, I'm now going to invite Penny Faust from the Oxford Jewish Congregation to say a few words. Thank you.
Holocaust Memorial Day was established in Britain more than 20 years ago to remind us both about what happened to millions of ordinary people during the years of the Nazi regime in Europe, and also what is happening in the world today. Then they were Jews, travellers, gypsies, homosexuals who were killed through genocide. Since then it's happened in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia and Darfur. Holocaust Memorial Day tells us not only about what humanity was capable of, but also what people still do. Genocide, after all, is not murder committed on a grand scale. Neither is it the natural consequence of war. It is the conscious effort by one group of ordinary people to eliminate another. It does not apply to killing an enemy's armed forces or politicians. It's concerned with killing ordinary people, male and female, old and young, strong and weak. All this is done with the stated purpose of preventing that group from existing, both at that time and into the future. And all too often it happens because we fail to recognise the validity of all human life, especially those that may be different from ourselves. Genocide in a society has to start somewhere. A recent television programme called How the Holocaust Began told the story. When the German army invaded Eastern Europe, small teams of Nazi SS were billeted in towns and villages. These Nazis encouraged the local population to kill the Jews who lived peaceably amongst them for hundreds of years. These were ordinary people who rounded up their ordinary Jewish neighbours and marched them out of their towns and villages. It was the ordinary people who did the shooting, continuing even when the Nazis were not there. Historians are only now discovering masses of bodies buried in trenches dug in local woods and forests. It's believed that more than 1 million ordinary people were killed this way, by bullets, long before the gas ovens of the killing camps were built. Furthermore, wherever occupation took place in Europe, ordinary people collaborated with the Nazis to give up their Jews. By the middle of World War II, once genocide was organised on an industrial scale, we know that, for example, in France and in Holland, it was the ordinary people who informed on Jews, rounded them up, and sent them off by train to be murdered. And it's happened since then. It was, after all, fairly recently that the ordinary people of Rwanda participated in the murder of their neighbours. I've often wondered about what my reaction would be if some of the people who live in my street, someone with a different coloured skin or of a different faith, were threatened by the political system of this country. At the time of the Holocaust, there were those righteous Gentiles, Christian, Muslim and secular, ordinary people who put their own lives at risk to save the lives of neighbouring Jews. What would I have done? The particular part of France which I know best is the southwest corner, the bit that touches both the Pyrenees and the Atlantic Ocean. During the war, it was occupied by the German army, and there were tanks in the street, and soldiers billeted amongst the local population. I knew a woman who told me of her life in the small Basque hill town of Molion, mostly known nowadays for the production of espadrilles. In 1941, Fanny was 6, and the third child in a large family living in a thin, 4-storied house in the centre of the town. One day, she asked her much-loved oldest brother, aged 10, why there were people living in their roof. And much to her shock and chagrin, her brother slapped her face. He hadn't ever hit her before. Never, he hissed. Never, ever mention that again. We don't know about that. So she didn't. Later, much later, after the occupation was over, she learned that her parents had taken in a local Jewish family and kept them hidden until it was safe for them to emerge. They'd not told their children because they thought that that way their children would not be blamed if the secret was discovered. Would I have done that? Could I put the lives of my 4 children, or nowadays my grandchildren, at risk to save the lives of others? I can't know, and I hope I never have to find out. The theme for this year's Holocaust Memorial Day is ordinary people. It should not only remind us about the history of genocide, but also that we are responsible for what goes on in our daily lives and in our country. Our leaders are themselves ordinary people who implement policies only with the consent of the majority of the population. Once again, ordinary people. And by extension, I believe that we cannot ever say about genocide that it couldn't happen here. Not without all of us, the ordinary people, being aware and accepting that we are all responsible for preventing genocide from happening. In Jewish tradition, a yahrzeit or yeartime candle is lit once a year on the anniversary of someone's death. We're lighting this candle to commemorate the lives of the millions of people killed in the genocide of the Second World War. 6 million Jews and 5 million others, principally travelling people, but also the disabled, homosexuals, political opponents, and some people of colour. For many of us, lighting the candle serves as a memorial to victims of other genocides and carries our hopes for a better future.
We will now have a minute's silence, and David will indicate when it's over. And then I'm going to invite Joey Mali from the Oxford Muslim community to say some words. Thank you very much.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the infinitely good, the most merciful. All praise be to God, Lord of the worlds. We are remembering today the victims and survivors of the Holocaust, and those who have died in many other genocides and conflicts since human capacity to unleash the most horrific violence and destruction has not diminished since the Holocaust, and neither, it seems, has humanity learned any lessons from the tragedy of the Holocaust. We live in hope in these testing times, for hope is a reflection of one's faith and illuminates their hearts. So let's reflect upon and seek the Lord's infinite mercy and blessings. Lord of the worlds, enlighten our hearts amidst the dark times. Lord, help us to see the other as our brother or sister. Lord, where there is hatred, misunderstanding, and mistrust, help us to replace that with love, understanding, and trust. Lord, help us and strengthen us to stand united against those who propagate hate and violence towards others. Lord, help us and strengthen us to stand united against all forms of violent extremism. Lord, help us to live by the values that are inherent within our traditions, values of compassion for the needy, love for the neighbor, and respect for one another. Lord, increase us in love and mercy towards the sick, hungry, poverty-stricken, the lonely and oppressed, wherever they are. Lord, help us and strengthen us to do all we can to promote understanding, respect, and mutual love for all. Lord, bless this great city of ours and protect our beautiful country from all that and all those who seek to do us harm. Amen.
I would now like to introduce Anthony Buckley, the City Rector, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. On this Holocaust Memorial Day, we pray for courage and honesty to look at the past and the present and to learn what needs to be learned, for compassion to weep with those who weep, for grace to learn what it is to be loved and to learn what it is to love, for strength to stand up for what is right and to turn away from what is wrong, for wisdom to listen well and speak well. May we learn the blessing of living the ordinary well. Bless, O Lord, our city and all who live, work and learn here, that we would indeed be the light in the darkness, that we would receive light and share light, that we would let the light shine, bringing welcome, comfort, hope, safety and truth. Amen.
I would now like to invite Kaylee to come and introduce the work she's been doing on how the representation of the Holocaust has been changing over time. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank all of you for being here today. We're very happy to have you with us. Today we gather to remember the victims of the Holocaust, as well as the subsequent genocides, as Penny mentioned, in Bosnia, Cambodia, Rwanda, Darfur, and unfortunately many others. Holocaust Memorial Day is a time to commemorate these victims, honor their memory, and to reflect upon the contemporary relevance of these ordinary people who lived through extraordinarily harrowing circumstances. As Penny noted, Holocaust Memorial Day has been commemorated in the United Kingdom since 2001, with communities all across the country coming together today, January 27th, a date which marks the liberation of the largest Nazi death camp, Auschwitz-Birkenau. Now, 78 years since the liberation of Auschwitz, these stories remain being worth told. These lives remain worth remembering, and these lessons remain worth learning. Today I could speak to you all about statistics, about the horrible facts and figures, the deportations, the incarcerations, the murders of 6 million Jews and 5 million homosexuals, Roma, Sinti, and others. But I would rather speak not in grand numbers, but in individuals. Individuals such as the late Ziggy Schipper, who passed away last week on his 93rd birthday. A Polish Jew, Ziggy was a survivor of the Łódź ghetto, Auschwitz-Birkenau, and Stutthof concentration camp, as well as an infamous 1945 death march. Ziggy moved to the United Kingdom in 1947, where he built a rich life for himself. Here he married his wife Jeanette, with whom he had 2 loving daughters, both of whom he was extremely proud of. He was also, like so many Englishmen, a great fan of football. He even had the chance to speak with the England team for the 2012 Euros in Poland, one of the great highlights of his life, he said. A Holocaust survivor, Ziggy was just an ordinary person, with ordinary hobbies and ordinary dreams, who suffered through extraordinary circumstances and decided to dedicate his life to sharing his story and furthering Holocaust education. We are privileged to live in a time in which we can still hear firsthand testimonies of those like Ziggy who survived the Holocaust. When survivors share their stories, they teach us so much more than history. They teach us about tolerance, about kindness, and respect. They teach us that the horrors of the Holocaust, the most notorious crime of modern history, were the experiences of ordinary people who were not so different from ourselves. But all too soon there will be no one left to share eyewitness accounts, and we will enter an age of post-witness remembering. This is why Holocaust Memorial Day and similar commemorative events are so important. It is our job as ordinary people to continue to tell these extraordinary stories, to continue memorializing those we have lost, and to continue to educate against anti-Semitism and other forms of prejudice for ourselves, for our loved ones, and for our communities. It is Jewish custom to place stones on the graves of loved ones. At the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., the gift shops sell little stones engraved with the word Lizkor, meaning to remember in Hebrew. On my first visit to the museum many years ago, I purchased one of these stones, and I have carried it with me ever since. This is one of the ways in which I remember and commemorate the many lives disrupted by and lost during the Holocaust. For others, commemoration might involve saying a prayer, volunteering in their communities, and like so many will hear today, sharing their stories. At 4 p.m. this afternoon, iconic buildings and landmarks across the United Kingdom will light up purple during the Light in the Darkness, a national moment of commemoration and solidarity, including Magdalen College Tower here in Oxford. Today, I invite you all to participate in this powerful moment of remembering by joining people across the nation who will light candles and put them safely in their windows, to remember those who were murdered for who they were, and to stand against prejudice and hatred today. It is a simple but profound gesture, and one of the many we may use to honor the ordinary people we have loved and lost this Holocaust Memorial Day. Thank you.
Well, thank you all very much for coming. And following on what Kaylee just said, I do commend the film. Sadly, I can't say I've seen it already, but I would like to see it again. It is available online. But to hear the testimony of one of the survivors is just remarkable. And like Primo Levi, they rise above the horrors in a remarkable way, which I hope all of us could try to aspire to. So I have to go, actually, I'm now about to speak to council staff about Holocaust Day and why we celebrate it, so I can't stay. But I'm going to thank you all very much, and as I say, the film is really worth seeing, and I hope many of you will have a chance to see it now. So thank you all for coming.